Hey everyone, Paul here. Let's go over what happened so far in Quadgun. In the prologue in Chapter 1, we learn of Carlos de Sanders, who's a pretty bad guy. And he enters the city at night and threatens to attack the city if his treasure isn't returned to him. We learn in Chapter 1 that Jenny escaped Lantec last night and is the reason that Carlos is so mad. She's agreed with Michelo to go see Lord Blake Williams and make a plan. For Chapter 2, we're taking a step to the side, and we are following a young girl named Tempest, who lives in the Copper Castle. Tempest is the daughter of Lord Blake Williams, and Michelo is her brother. So here it is. Hope you enjoy it. Chapter 2, Tempest. Tempest awoke. She felt the chill in the morning air and in her face and arms and shivered. The boiler must have cut out again, and she promised herself that she'd ask her father to get it fixed. The duck-down comforter that still covered her legs was warm and inviting, but she was a moving sleeper, and more often than not, she'd kick the blanket off. But that's why they had a boiler running full-time during the winter months, and if the castle cannot keep its boilers running, how was the rest of the city managing? In truth, she was only half asleep. The gunshot earlier that morning had woken her up, and the sound of her father shouting on the steps below was unmistakable. The commotion had died down a few minutes later, but Tempest had trouble falling back to sleep. Perhaps it was the temperature, which had been steadily decreasing as the night drew on, or perhaps it was because today's sun brought her older brother Torben's 15th birthday, and she always loved it when the family would get together and have a feast. She missed her older siblings, the ones who had already moved out. She and Torben were the last Williams kids in the Copper Castle, but as she was growing up, she remembered Susie, Julia, Michelo, and Indigo all living here with her. Her mother was there too, and now that she wasn't there, made Tempest sadder than ever. Of her brothers, Michelo was by far her favorite. Not that Indigo or Torben weren't fun, they just spent most of their time trailing after father and leaving silly girls to do silly things. Not Michelo. Never Michelo. He was different. He was kind and paid attention to her. He always made time to sit with her, play dolls if she wanted, and kiss her on the forehead and call her Williamette. That was her favorite. She was the youngest of the Williams kids, just passing her 13th birthday. And to have an older brother, especially one as strong and charming as Michelo, was an anchor for her. A way to look back on her life here in the cold Copper Castle and have better memories than studies with her private teachers and etiquette lessons from Bula Dritz, that witch from Mantua. She decided it was time to get up, even though Brielle and Marnie, her handmaidens, hadn't entered. They would usually bring a fresh change of clothes and hot water to wash her hair and braid it, but if she could sneak out before they came, she might be able to play in the sun gardens before her lessons. She tossed off her nightgown and threw on a brass-buttoned shirt, yesterday's double-layered cotton pants, and stiff frozen socks from under her bed. Then she went to the basin. The water was clear and unused from last night, and a splash to her face woke her up more than anything she could have done. She dabbed at her face with a fresh cotton towel and looked herself over. What she saw, she hated. Her face was pocked with freckles, especially on her nose, and her plain brown hair trailed halfway down her back. She made a sneering face in the mirror. If only she had red hair or golden blonde hair, that would be a dream. In the middle of untangling the laces of her winter boots, a black bird landed loudly on her windowsill. It squawked impolitely and pecked at the corn she had left there last night. Tempest dropped her boots and ran to the window and threw it open, startling the bird into flight. A black bird meant bad luck, and with her brother's birthday today, she needed luck for it to be perfect. "That's not for you," she called. "Go get your white cousin." An audible throat clearing came from down below, and Tempest spotted a woman in the courtyard. "Hello, Lady Adrena. It is lovely weather we are having this morning, don't you think?" Each word was practiced and automatic, and it felt like sewage coming out of her mouth. "Though I do wish to see the willows in the southern gates blooming again, wouldn't you agree?" Lady Adrena humphed and turned to walk briskly away from Tempest. When the old cow had distanced herself enough, Tempest stuck her tongue out at her and slammed the window closed. She was about to turn away when she glimpsed a small glint of light descending lightly to the pile of corn on the sill. "A snowflake," she breathed. That was it. She threw her winter boots on and raced out the door down the hall. On her way outside, she sped through the kitchens, dodging and weaving the chefs preparing the castle's morning meal. She smelled roasting bacon, stewed sausage, and fresh blueberries being made into jam. Ducking under a counter, she reached around the back of the baker's table, snatched a hot slice of honeyed bread, 3 glazed rolls, and a cherry tart without being seen by anyone. Then she took 3 whole apples, a vine of white grapes, and a wedge of soft, sharp cheese, and stuffed it all into her bag. Everything except one of the glazed rolls, which she popped into her mouth in one large bite. The hallway to the front lobby was cold after feeling the heat of the ovens, and Tempest strode briskly through. Then she wound her way down the stairs, ducked through 2 men carrying a chest of drawers between them, and hopped over Tom the tomcat, who was chasing some small thing. The front doors of the Copper Castle rose before her, and with a nod to Wilton the watch, she pushed open the door and stepped out. It was colder out here, but that didn't stop the people from the City of Brass from their daily chores and jobs. Over there was a man in a booth, selling used tools on the corner, his eyes and posture slumped in boredom. Then across from him was a woman with a gun booth and many generic pistols and cheap rifles that couldn't hit a target at 100 yards. There were people everywhere, heading to and fro, looking to make some marks or to spend them. But it wasn't the people she had stepped outside to see. She strained her neck back and peered into the gray sky. There were no clouds that she could see, but she knew one must be coming over the parapets of the Copper Castle from the tumult edge. She hadn't imagined a snowflake, and where there was one, there were sure to be more. The only changes to the big blue canvas above her were the twisting and turning of schools of fish that dominated the sky. Bright, red-bellied mackerels and hordes of synchronized tuna dipped and swayed in the air currents, and every few weeks or so, a massive whale would appear and block out the sun for an hour. That's when the skyships took flight, attempting to bring down the massive creature and secure the City of Brass with enough food to last the winter months. Her people depended on hunts like those, because when food arrived from the sustenlands, half or more was beginning to rot. It was fish that kept them alive, whalers and pikemen. But without coal to power the airships, more and more whales came and went without opposition. There she waited for who knows how long. Sometimes time passed faster when you were waiting for something. Sometimes it went slower. Regardless, she suddenly realized she was not alone. There was a boy next to her, assuming her same position and looking into the sky. "What you looking at?" he asked, not breaking form to look at her directly. "Is there a silverfish up there somewhere? All I see is the bluegills, and that little pack of minnows. Oh, and that sky turtle there." Jonas was a boy Tempest often found near the castle entrance. His hair was pushed under a patched hat, and he wore the same pair of suspenders every day. He assured her that he had a home, though Tempest had never been there. She suspected he was poor, perhaps parentless and living in an alley or someplace equally terrible. And there were people like that here. The City of Brass did not proclaim to be wealthy, but what they did have, they made the most of it. That's what her lessons had taught anyway, all except one small fact that kept gnawing at her. She could steal all the food in her bag, and no one would even blink at it. The The city of brass ate far worse than those in the copper castle, and those living in the castle were much less than those out on the streets. That was one truth she couldn't ignore. That's what Michelot had revealed to her, why he said he had to move out. He said it was his calling in life to right the wrongs this city was committing. She had seen it for herself, now that she was aware, and the thought of her impoverished people made the excitement of today's birthday feast rot away. "Here," she said, handing over the bag of food. He accepted and handed over a similar bag, this one empty. She had made Torben give his identical bag to her so she could make this type of trade with Jonas. He was a hero to her people, the person Tempest wished she could be, but she was stuck in lessons all day and learning how to be better than everyone here. That thought sickened her too. Jonas would only take what he and his family needed. Then he would find someone who needed the food more than him and give it away. "Anyone in particular?" he asked. He'd give the remaining food to someone specific if she wanted. Tempest thought. It was still winter. The cold hadn't even seemed to let up since New Year. People would still be gathering at warm places. Old oil barrels set ablaze, community halls, or industrial runoff vents. Then her thoughts turned to those vents, to the people choosing to stand in the wasted air and breathe it in just to be warm. "Take it to a vent," she instructed, "and give it to a child there." "On my honor, Lady Tempest," he replied gallantly, "it shall be done." She smiled. Not many ladies of the court had a personal knight, even if he wasn't a knight by name. He was to her. And that's what mattered most. Her valiant knight would do as she asked, and in return, he would be praised by those he served, just like a real knight should. The knights of Father's castle seemed to be much less caring about the people of the city, and much more interested in pleasing their lord, her father. Sure, they carried a traditional sword on one hip and a Faber pistol on the other, but instead of helping the region they served, they acted as law enforcement. People feared them and cowered when they came patrolling by. It was nothing like the knights in the old stories Grandpa Tom would tell. In his stories, knights rode bravely to fight the threats of the region. They led armies and stormed castles. When needed, they saved young women from evil men and married them. They fathered honorable sons and daughters who grew up to be noble lords and ladies. But it seemed those were only stories. "I was looking for snowflakes," she said. "I just saw one out my window and thought there'd be more. I hoped there would be anyway." "Why?" asked Jonas. "You know what would happen if it started snowing? The clouds from the tumult edge would rise up, given strength from the god Lurius, and cover our city. It could come down on us with such cold terror that we'd be forced to lock our doors and eat spiders and rats. We'd be under his power." He gazed at the sky and saw no sign of cloud, just like she did. "Thank the merciful gods it's not happening." Tempest let out a breath. "The gods aren't merciful, Jonas. They're..." But she had trouble thinking of the right word. "Have you heard? There's some kind of treasure in the city. Some of the boys and I are going to go look for it." "Treasure?" Tempest asked. "What kind of treasure?" "What other kind is there besides one that can make us rich? The whole city's talking about it. They call it the Lantec Lord's treasure. Doesn't that sound exciting?" Frankly, it did sound exciting, but not for the reasons Jonas was excited. She had no need of money or precious gems in a box. What would she do with things like that? Everything she needed was supplied for her in the castle. What she really longed for was a group of friends her age. Jonas was the closest thing to an actual friend she had, and she loved hearing about him and his days deep in the city. She spent her days sitting with tutors and instructors who taught her boring lessons on mathematics, social sciences, history and lore, and etiquette. She was swiftly becoming a proper lady, and missing out on just being a kid. "Me and some of the guys are going out to look for it. Do you want to come with us?" "I have lessons," she explained sadly, "and my father won't let me miss them." She had met some of the guys, and they were all pretty nice. There was one who was always mean, though. "Is Martel going with you?" "Yeah," Jonas replied. "He's the one who thought we should go looking for it." "Why? Do you like him or something?" "Heavens, no!" She couldn't believe Jonas would even think that. "I hate that boy. Last time we were together, he put axle grease in my hair. It took my handmaidens hours to get it out, and I hated every minute of it. If it was Martel's idea, I won't go. You'll just have to tell me how it went." "Well, all right," he said. "We're heading out right now anyway. Martel says we should hunt for it until dark, so I guess that's what we'll do." "After you give out the food, you mean?" Yeah, of course. I'll head to the vents right now," he said, taking a peek inside the bag to see what it was. "I'll tell Martel to wait for me." Tempest shivered. Jonas put a hand on her shoulder. "Get inside, Lady Tempest. It's cold out here. I promise to give this food to those in need." "Thanks, Jonas," she said. "And I promise that when I can make you a true knight with a title and land, I will." There were still no snowflakes in the air and no clouds in the sky. It disheartened her. She had been so excited to see another sea storm, to feel the snow in the air and on the ground, and to play in it. Tutor Hampkin had told her that the snows fill the water basins, and when that happens, they don't have to buy and ship as much water from the Ataria lakes. A sharp tapping came from her window, and Marnie threw it open, spooking the most beautiful white bird into flight. "Lady Tempest, get in here at once before you freeze your toes off. We need to wash you up before lessons, and your father will be wroth if you are late." Marnie glanced down and swept the remaining corn from her sill with the back of her hand. Tempest breathed a final lungful of fresh air and re-entered the castle.